I'm not a huge fan of space sci-fi, but The Outer Worlds still managed to worm its way into my heart. Even the repetitive shootouts and bland plot didn't stop me from enjoying the playthrough, and I knew I'd fall for the second part with all its flaws in exactly the same way. I didn't have to force the love. Obsidian Entertainment did massive work on the bugs and improved the game exactly where it was needed. What stayed the same is the forgettable plot with the same tired critique of capitalism, safe choices, boring villains, and unconvincing factions. At the same time, The Outer Worlds 2 kept me hooked for a solid 30 hours, and complaints about the story quickly faded into the background. Because beyond it, the game has a beautiful world, interesting side quests, witty dialogue, tons of role-playing opportunities, stunning music, and dynamic gameplay with a bunch of new gadgets and a hilarious flaw system. Play the best agent of the Earth Directorate. You don't need to play the first game to understand what's going on in the sequel. The games share the same universe but take place in completely different star systems under the Protectorate's umbrella. Using invented jump drive technology, this authoritarian faction was able to travel through space at light speed and colonize several nearby systems, including Halcyon from the first game. The setting of The Outer Worlds 2 is one of those colonized systems, Arcadia, where the Protectorate continues its dangerous experiments on the Horizon Station. 4 planets are available for landing, plus a few smaller stations, and completing all the quests took me about 35 hours, twice as long as a similar exploration of the first game. Unfortunately, progress has a downside. Thanks to the jump drives, mysterious spatial anomalies started opening up all over the world. To figure out their nature and maybe find a way to stop the rifts from existing, the Earth Directorate sends its agents to the station, including our protagonist. Teaming up with another agent, Augustine de Vries, the Directorate infiltrates Horizon looking for answers, but instead they find a traitor in their ranks. And a ton of problems. When de Vries deliberately breaches the experiment's integrity, a massive rift tears right through the middle of the station and rips it apart. The protagonist miraculously escapes in one of the pods and drifts into open space for a good decade, but during that absence, both the situation in Arcadia and the rift crisis have changed dramatically. First, there are way more anomalies everywhere, which has significantly weakened the Protectorate's grip on the colonies. Second, the familiar competing corporations from the first game, Spacer's Choice and Anti-Cleo, have merged into one. Now, taking advantage of the chaos in the colony, Anti's Choice has invaded Arcadia to free people from the Protectorate's tyranny and bring a bright future, capitalism, and honest business. Tragicomedy in 3 acts. Tragicomedy in 3 acts. Tragicomedy in 3 acts. As if that wasn't enough, the rift has cut people off from the rest of the world. Arcadia is impossible to leave, so contact with Earth is lost and no new orders from the bosses can come through. To escape the system, you'll have to return to your duties as an Earth Directorate agent and deal with the anomalies yourself, relying on your own strength, your allies, and the ideals of the organization. In the popular in-game series, Earth Directorate agents are brave and talented heroes, saviors of humanity, and destroyers of villainous plans. In reality, things might turn out very differently. Anyone can become a Directorate agent, a former convict forced into service, a criminal, or a champion of law and order. Backgrounds have replaced the qualifications from the first game. They don't give stat bonuses anymore, but add unique dialogue lines. When I picked Professor, for example, I could butt into conversations with the intellectual elite and come across as an insufferable know-it-all to regular folks. By the way, unavailable lines from different backgrounds are marked in conversations. That's how I discovered they're present in almost every dialogue. Huge room for role-playing a unique character with their own worldview and personal quirks. Not every line affects the conversation or helps complete a quest, but every time I noticed one, it felt like great attention to detail. Though I did read a review saying some backgrounds are more useful than others. Maybe I just got unlucky with Professor. Alongside your background, positive and negative traits influence role-playing. A witty hero can always lighten the mood, an eloquent one can talk any villain into anything, a dumb one can identify a forgery just by licking the paper, and a lucky one can poke random buttons without the required skill and open the needed door. When I chose a frail character, I got a penalty to base health, but in return could disperse a crowd of protesters, just by coughing on them and showing off my rash. Positive traits you unlock during play depend on stats or even other traits. You'll have to peek into the skill tree to reach the necessary ones, or leave it to chance and be surprised by new traits that pop up. During the game, you can also unlock flaws. If you frequently give orders to companions, they'll offer the dependent flaw: you deal less damage yourself, but companion damage increases. If you crawl around and stealth a lot, you get bad knees. Crouch speed increases, but every time you crouch or stand up, your knees crack loudly, attracting enemies within 10 meters. Some flaws are pretty hilarious and you want to take them just for the memes. Others can seriously change your playstyle, so think twice before accepting a new one. Gambler types at some point get offered to never get rid of flaws at all. In exchange, you get extra attribute points on level up. But is it worth it when over time your directorate agent becomes a pathological liar, kleptomaniac, and walking disaster? Defenders of Arcadia, the world is chaotic enough even without the protagonist, which the agents discover as soon as they land on the first planet. On colorful Eden, the Protectorate and ever-present Auntie's Choice are fighting for power, and in this mess the heroes must find clues about De Vries' whereabouts, figure out what the former colleague is after, and how to stop her. They'll also talk to the leaders of the strongest organizations, since De Vries claimed she was following some grand plan. While searching, you'll definitely want to stop and admire the views. In the first game, I could never immerse myself because the world looked so bad and artificial, but here I often paused to find a nice angle for another screenshot. A photo mode would have been perfect. Truth be told, Eden didn't impress me much. All those bright, eye-searing colors that became the Outer World's signature didn't appeal to me in the first game either. But as you explore, you'll encounter truly beautiful planets. The immersion was helped a lot by the music written specifically for the game. The tracks are so good that within a couple of hours I turned into a walking advertisement for every corporate product and still hum the whole soundtrack to this day. And even though the open world turned out quite empty, with points of interest mostly being standalone buildings, thanks to the landscapes and the radio, I never once felt tempted to use fast travel. The search for De Vries eventually leads the heroes to a Protectorate base that's not easy to infiltrate, so companions, the miraculously survived Horizon Agent Niles and the robot VLORI, suggest getting help from allies instead of storming the outpost with one pistol. Over time, the team gains a washed-up Auntie's Choice mercenary with a horribly grafted implant, a slightly unhinged cultist with a love for violence, a Protectorate arbiter whose presence in the team is a miracle in itself, and a deadly assassin from the Order of Ascension. I'd love to talk about the companions' unique skills and how they affect combat, but during shootouts my allies always died first and never got a chance to shine. I can't say all companions got interesting backstories or worthy story arcs, but there aren't any outright repulsive ones either. In some ways, they even feel organic and alive, especially when reacting to player actions. I was surprised when Niles commented on my refusal to use ladders on the ship, or when Arbiter Tristan wondered why we keep looking for back ways into buildings instead of going through the front gate. Outside of combat, companions are way more useful. Niles can craft ammo and mod gear, for example, while Tristan spots all hidden passages that I often miss due to lack of perception. The grand plan on Eden the Protectorate still has plenty of enemies you can convince to cooperate, and while the first act boils down to capturing an enemy base, there are quite a few ways to do it. First, you can ignore allies and go solo the whole way, tough with starting gear but possible. Second, you can get help from the authorities in Fairfield City. Minister Milverstrit and Officer Cower have different approaches, but both quest chains lead to the same result. The Protectorate's influence on the island weakens, making the base easier to capture. The officer asks you to sabotage the automaton factory to ease the coming assault, while the minister suggests swaying the residents of Westport, one of the Protectorate settlements, to the corporation's side. And if that quest description gives you déjà vu, you're right. The exact same task existed in the first game, swaying people to a can factory. I still don't know if it's a coincidence, a deliberate reference, or self-sabotage by the developers, because that's where the annoying self-repeats end. And while the game still has plenty of boring or filler quests, they're more than made up for by interesting ones. In the Anti-Cleo faction mission, you'll do industrial espionage and escape a sanatorium where the heroes were forcibly committed for mental rehabilitation. At a companion's request, you'll run an obstacle course of electric plates, mines, and laser traps. An empty base turns out not so empty because rift-irradiated cultists are now only visible through special glasses. Some quests revolve around finding wires and powering the right doors. Many quest paths depend on gathered information or even past actions. Spare a villain's henchman twice and you can convince the villain himself to surrender. A terminal recording or stolen note lets you manipulate an uncooperative character. I was surprised when one scientist reminded me I'd spared his colleague a few missions earlier, instantly made me want to replay as a different character and roleplay a villain. There are even special traits for that. Take Psychopath to deal more damage to hostile factions, or Quiet Terror and Grim Visage to inspire fear in enemies in both dialogue and combat. In all 30 hours, I don't think I fought a single story boss. Every time I found a way to talk them down or humiliate them so badly they went crying to the corner. Kind of a shame because the arenas for fighting them are incredibly beautiful. The variety the first game lacked isn't just in dialogue. When it comes to combat, your inventory always has unique weapons and armor that push you to experiment and keep you from sticking to one build. I found a gorgeous cloak that deducts bits local currency proportional to damage taken, had to completely rethink battles. Grab a rifle, shift some work to companions, because I'd rather die than spend money, needless to say. With that approach, my character became incredibly weak and vulnerable. No transmog in the game, I flatly refused to take off the cloak and hat, so I switched from direct fights to stealth. The game is nowhere near Metal Gear Solid or Splinter Cell levels, but stealth infiltrations and clearouts handle the job of diversifying gameplay just fine, even against not the smartest enemies. Plus, new abilities and gadgets unlock gradually. Acid spray to leave no evidence, glasses to see through walls, gas mask, double jump boots, distraction grenades, and the familiar time slow from the first game. With that arsenal, I never got bored until the very end. I constantly mixed stealth with action and only struggled on bosses because my chosen flaws made the character insanely weak once spotted, but deadly in the shadows. The game actively encourages not just charging in guns blazing, but using your build's advantages. An eloquent character can talk their way into a closed factory by sweet-talking the overseer. A stealthy one sneaks past guards and reaches the roof to enter via ledge. An engineer reprograms drones, hacks force fields, or shocks distracted workers. Finding the optimal path every time became an engaging puzzle, especially with so many tools and weapons in the arsenal. The Outer Worlds 2 is far from perfect, but not every game is destined to become that Game of the Year masterpiece. It's a worthy sequel from developers who simply took the best of the first game and built on it. Even though the setting and lore aren't close to me at all, I couldn't stay indifferent. The studio's warm feelings for their project are visible in everything. The ironic and often absurd dialogue that keeps making you chuckle. The post-apocalyptic Wild West atmosphere with an Art Nouveau touch, and the amazing music for which I'd happily give the game bonus points. And while the plot is still the weakest part of the series, a bug that prevented saving drove me mad and forced me to replay 4 hours, and the world feels empty, I still love it with all its strengths and flaws. Pros: dynamic and interesting gameplay with stealth action elements and tons of gadgets. Flaw system: tons of opportunities to roleplay a unique hero, memorable side quests, radio with music written specifically for the game. Beautiful locations. Cons: boring main story quests, empty open world.